Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Tanya Shrum, and we are joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thadeus Greenson, and our California local journalism fellow, Kelby McIntosh. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Tanya. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Having a lovely week here in paradise. And you have some very important news to share with us, as well as a cover story. So we're going to dive right in. Thad, would you like to tell us what's coming to the cover story of this week's North Coast Journal?
Yeah, absolutely. This week's cover story is an interview I did with North Coast Congressmember Jared Huffman last week. And we had planned on trying to catch up with Huffman in advance of the Republican National Convention, which is currently underway in Milwaukee. And, we wanted to do that because he is leading this ad hoc task force, congressional task force, trying to raise awareness and bring attention to Project 2025, which is a project of the Heritage Foundation, the conservative kind of right-wing think tank that has been prominent for decades, probably 30 or 40 years, in kind of guiding conservative policy. And Project 2025 is kind of, we'll get more into, I'm sure, in a minute, but is a really ambitious document that it's like 900 pages long and really kind of sets out what is aimed to be a roadmap for the next Republican president's agenda. Their hope is obviously that's going to be former President Trump, and so we wanted to talk to Huffman about this document, about his task force and the work he's doing, kind of to coincide with the big Republican event that's going to showcase the Republican agenda for their hopeful presidential term. So we spoke to Huffman on Thursday, and I thought the interview was good and kind of touched on what we wanted to hear from him about his points of concern and what how this task force came about and what its priorities are. And then, of course, 2 days later, there was the assassination attempt on former President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and fortunately, President Trump was largely unharmed, although another person was killed and 2 others critically injured. And of course, after this assassination attempt, there was lots of talk about kind of the political climate that led to it, and there was allegations from some Republican members of Congress, that Democratic talking points and rhetoric had really put a target on Trump, so to speak, and may have inspired the assassination attempt. And so some of the inspiration for this week's editorial is kind of some internal conversations we had about whether to go forward with publishing this interview with Huffman, which is certainly very critical of former President Trump and his agenda and his policy ideas, as well as this Heritage Foundation document. And after some back and forth, we ultimately decided, in kind of reviewing the interview a couple more times, to move forward, and really felt like both that it was important to talk about the issues of this campaign, which this document is certainly at the center of those, and that there wasn't, Huffman didn't say anything that we felt like really crossed the lines of being overly incendiary. He's not calling the former president a demonic force or any of these kinds of things that seemed overly hyperbolic. I mean, he's really talking about the Republican Party platform, this Heritage Foundation document, and what he sees as the dangers of it for the country. So we made the choice to move forward with that, and then kind of in parallel, I wrote an editorial just really kind of reflecting on the politically toxic the toxic nature of our politics right now, and a lot of the rhetoric that has seemingly been escalating for a decade or so at this point, and just really kind of wanted to to provide some words urging everybody to really kind of prioritize civility, and the idea that we can debate ideas, we can criticize other people's policy ideas and policy priorities, but we really don't need to attack their character. So I'm hoping those two things in kind of being published in concert will be taken in in the vein that we wanted to present them, which is really, a focus on the issues that are at play in this election.
Absolutely. And I thought your editorial did a great job of not only eloquently stating that, but also going through the timeline in the past 10 years or so and reminding folks of kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I reflected on after the assassination attempt on Saturday, and looking at kind of the news coverage of it, is, I think that we have a tendency in media for sure, but then I think also just kind of in our culture is, to view these things as when they come up as these horrible anomalies, these outliers that don't generally happen here in the United States. But if you really look at the timeline over the last decade or so, there's a pretty steady stream of politically inspired violence in this country that is really alarming. And I think that it does us all a disservice to write it off as something that doesn't reflect our culture or our politics, because it increasingly does. And if we kind of keep burying our heads in the sand saying this is the thing that doesn't happen here, and let's make sure it doesn't happen here, we're really ignoring the fact that it is happening here, and we need to stop it from happening here.
Well, and unfortunately, it's just the next generational wave. I mean, all of our parents or grandparents dealt with this in the 1960s.
Oh, absolutely.
And it seems like that climate is kind of once again being stoked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Well, I know these stories are both kind of in concert, but what are some of the highlights from the interview with Jared Huffman that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that his major points of concern with this Heritage Foundation plan is that one is that he argues that it's really impossible to separate it from what another Trump administration would be. Trump has kind of distanced himself from the document a little bit, saying that he doesn't know what's in it, even though he disagrees with some parts of it, which there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But what Huffman's take is that, the Heritage Foundation is sponsoring the Republican National Convention. Somebody who worked on this document wrote the Republican National Platform. 6 former cabinet members of Trump contributed to this document. That there's just really no separating the document itself from Trump. And so that, his view really is that a vote for Donald Trump in the presidential election is a vote for enacting this policy blueprint. What concerns him most, I think, about the policy document is that there is really a concerted effort in it to consolidate presidential power, to remove some of the guardrails and checks and balances that have historically been placed on the presidency. And so that is everything from doing away with the civil service. So the vast majority of the federal government is currently, staffed by people who don't hold partisan positions. They work for Republican administrations, then they work for Democratic administrations, then Republican administrations, and work to enact the policies that those administrations put forward. But they are not partisan positions. And what this would do is kind of what the document proposes is removing a lot of the employment protections that they enjoy. And so making it so that a new administration could come in, fire most of the federal workforce, and then replace them with essentially partisan appointees. So he found that as very problematic. He also found a proposal that would really consolidate most arms of the federal government under the president's purview. So the kind of doing away with the independence of the Justice Department and making the Justice Department directly answerable to the presidency as hugely problematic. And Huffman feels very much that some of this is an answer to the the challenges that Trump faced in his first term, trying to enact certain policies and not being able to kind of navigate them through the federal bureaucracy. And so some of this would remove parts of that bureaucracy and, again, parts of the independent arms of the government that work together to function as a whole. So he found that deeply problematic. There's lots of little things in the policy document that he had issue with too. Everything from pulling the so-called abortion pill off the market, attempts to kind of roll back LGBTQ protections in federal law, doing away with environmental protections. Doing away, for instance, with the Department of Education, and so really removing any federal involvement from state education systems. He feels like the document is hugely problematic on kind of every possible level. So that was the main takeaway, and then I think it was interesting just to hear from him kind of what how this task force came about and what it's trying to do. And so really his idea was to start this kind of as a small thing, and maybe get a few other members who would kind of huddle together to talk about talking points and some media outreach strategy. And really he feels like they're up to I think 24 members now, and he's been in conference calls with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries about how to kind of further the work of this task force. And so he's kind of said we've been onboarded to the mothership. So this has gone from a little effort kind of on the side of the Democratic National Committee and Democratic Party to something that's really becoming front and center. And he expects to become more and more so as we enter the final 100 days or so of the presidential campaign.
Well, I appreciate that him and you as the reporter are bringing this to the public's attention. I do feel like that momentum of people starting to ask questions and starting to read at least the highlights of Project 2025 and get informed.
I think folks should, obviously it's a big ask to read the entire 900 pages of the document, but I think people should read how, this interview with Huffman and other reporting on the document itself to get a firm idea of what's in it and what, at the very least, the people very much in Trump's inner circle have put forward as their policy goals and roadmap.
And I thought it was interesting that Mr. Huffman also mentioned that he's seeing some of these policies kind of sneakily attempted to be enacted even before November in Congress.
Yeah, he definitely talked about, the more the task force efforts to raise awareness about it have kind of gained a foothold, the more folks are noticing that, it's coming up, these talking points are coming up in committee meetings, brought forward by other Republican members of Congress and whatnot. And I think that's something to keep in mind too, that that he definitely highlighted, is that while his view is that this document is really written for a Trump presidency starting in 2025, that it's not only that, right? These are conservative ideals and visions for policy goals. And so it only makes sense then that current Republican members of Congress would start to try to enact them, would start to try to gain favor for them by using talking points around them. And also that, if Trump does not win the presidency in November, that something very similar to this could resurface in, for Project 2029 for the next presidential election and moving on forward.
Absolutely. Well, before we shift our gears over to Kelby, is there anything you'd like to add before we move on?
Just that I hope folks get informed and register to vote, because a lot at stake in November.
Absolutely. And I encourage everybody to pick up this week's journal and read the interview and read the journal for yourself. Stay informed. And with that, Kelby, I would like you to tell us some good news about something in our local community that people should start getting excited about.
Right on. I will do my best to do the justice that Jen does to these stories. I will do my best. But more so than anything, this is a place that even you're familiar with, and I'm just learning about more than anything else, which is Sea Goat Farms. One of the standout or highlight things that I learned about Sea Goat Farms is just the fact that they have a produce program, which is from what I've learned, I've ran across these programs before, but they from the ones that I've personally ran into, it just seems like a one size kind of fits all kind of thing. But what I like about Sea Goat's farm produce program is that they have small, medium, and large style boxes that you can ship for. They come in weekly shipments, but also too, like you can pay them out monthly as well. And I just think that's really great more than anything else, because I might not want a big crate of winter produce. I might want just a small crate of winter produce, and Sea Goat Farms has you covered with whatever produce needs that you have when it comes to ordering these kinds of things. But what I like about what Megan said in the article is that it is trying to make sure that these produce that are locally grown are making them very accessible for the community. So that's why their box program is designed this way. And also too, not only is it just designed in this way, they are really for about just making sure that everything is locally sourced, but also to getting the best kind of produce that you can. Now, if you want to get into the details of what comes into the box, what seasonal produce happen and all that kind of stuff, that information is actually on the seagoatfarms.org website, where you can get an understanding of prices, produce that come in the box, how the seasonal stuff kind of works. But overall, it sounds just like it's something that even I'm interested in, and that says a lot, because I'm just a Safeway shopper. I'm a basic Safeway shopper, but now it makes me want to get like more locally entrenched with the produce that I get. And because I know like it's coming from locally sourced farms, and it's probably way better than what I'm getting at my grocery store experience. I'm just a college student that just gets whatever. But now with Sea Goat Farms, I can actually get great produce and support the community at the same time.
Well, and if you live in McKinleyville, you just have to go past Safeway, and Sea Goat Farmstand is just down there on your left, over there on Hiller.
Right,
And you can
right.
check it out for yourself.
Exactly. And I like the fact that it changed from just a simple kind of fireworks stand into something bigger, like than just a simple fireworks stand. It started out as a fireworks stand, but then Megan started putting produce there, and then the demand got way bigger than what she could do. And then it just kind of evolved and morphed into this bigger thing. And now there's like, she's done strawberries, added in an orchard, and she's trying to expand more for what can be offered at the Sea Goat Farmstand too. So that's always a highlight. And I think even before we got onto this subject, you mentioned that you got eggs from there.
I did. It started off as, just a little sign at the corner of McKinleyville Ave and Hiller. And it's also a really cute little community area where the laundromat is and a little soda shop. And so it's kind of fun to putz around. And then, yeah, it's grown over time. And it makes me very happy to see that now we're having some reporting by Simona and bringing us this wonderful story.
Exactly. It gives me a reason to venture the other direction that I go, instead of always coming to Eureka. It gives me more of a reason to go into McKinleyville now, for sure.
Always a good time in McKinleyville. Well, is there anything else you would like to share about this article before we're going to turn back to Thad for one more story?
I will say this for the readers who do pick up this issue of the journal, along with just this beautiful article on Sea Goat Farms. There's recipes for blanched spinach and and carrot ginger soup and a French. I didn't even know this was a thing. A French style steamed carrot dish that it just sounds immaculate and might inspire me to buy some carrots today. So just had to throw that out there to our readers today. So thank you so much.
I always appreciate the recipes for certain. And with that, we also have an amazing news story that was brought to us by Thad this week. Would you like to fill us in on that follow-up from an article last week?
Yeah, I had on Friday. I had the wonderful experience of getting to hang out at the free clinic being put on at the Adorny Center, offering free medical, dental, and vision care by the California Care Force, a nonprofit arm of a state dental surgeon organization. And so I'd done a story kind of letting folks know that this was going to be going on. And then, yeah, like I said, spent a bunch of Friday there talking to folks who started lining up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 3 hours before this thing opened, trying to ensure that they got care. And then, it was kind of a two-pronged experience, because on the one hand, it was really heartwarming and inspiring talking to these healthcare volunteers, but then also just general volunteers, folks from our community who heard about this and wanted to get involved in the effort. And so there was optometrists, dentists, dental hygienists, a couple of physicians who volunteered their time, and on Friday essentially took time away from their own practices in order to come and provide free care. So that was just really heartwarming. And then folks from the community volunteering to do everything from, kind of getting patients registered to helping with parking and all kinds of stuff. And, on the flip side of that was talking to folks who are facing like really real needs, whether it's not having seen a dentist in a decade or having, an impacted rotten tooth that's been really bothering them acutely for some time, or just not having been able to get a new prescription, a new set of eyeglasses for years. And this clinic kind of gave them the opportunity to come in one day without an appointment, show up and have these very basic needs met, free of charge, without anybody asking kind of about their employment status, their insurance, anything like that. Just really offering these services with no questions asked. And so, on the one hand, I feel like it was just kind of this beautiful display of the generosity of our community, and this nonprofit California Care Force. Also, some heavy hitting sponsors like the Humboldt Area Foundation and Department of Health and Human Services, which combined, I think, to contribute more than $70,000 to kind of fund the nuts and bolts of this effort. So, on the one hand, it was just kind of this extreme generosity and this really awesome part of our community. And then the other part, with these 500 plus, I think, just almost 500 patients. They provided, I think, more than 500 services because some of those patients got multiple things done, but just really spoke to this acute need that we have here with obviously a significant portion of our population living in poverty, and just really a lack of healthcare professionals of all types, from optometrists to dentists to physicians. So it felt at once like a testament to what is good in our community and an absolute condemnation of our current healthcare system. And this is just my opinion, but a system that requires professionals to volunteer their time and folks to wait in line starting at 4 o'clock in the morning to meet very basic needs, like extracting a rotten tooth feels really wrong, to be honest.
Well, and it was a former dentist, Dr. Tom Lewis, that it was kind of his brainchild, and we really appreciate all the effort of all the local and maybe not so local volunteers that came up here for our underserved area and got some people some really needed help. And it warms my heart to see it, as I'm sure it did yours.
Absolutely. And last little note, I know we're running out of time, but Tom told me that his goal is to make this an annual thing. So he's going to keep working with California Care Force, other local sponsors, to try to do this annually, to make sure that he's doing what he can to see that local needs are met.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate everybody that participated. I heard wonderful things from people I personally knew that went and got things done. So thank you, Humboldt, and thank you both, Kelby and Thad, for another week. That wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available now on newsstands, or of course you can view it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum, and thank you for being with us and staying informed and supportive here in our local community on the North Coast.